as well. You have this personal, quiet moment, tinged, you have to be thinking, tinged with sadness.
Thinking in the 4 years, it was a very short time that Charles has been king. So he started off with Theresa May, so she was Prime Minister for just over 3 years. Boris Johnson, again, just over 3 years. Liz Truss, of course, 49 days, as the tabloids had her in competition to see if an iceberg lettuce would last longer than her in office. Rishi Sunak, just not quite 2 years. And then the only Prime Minister that's been elected, which is Keir Starmer, 2 years and just a few weeks. I mean, that turnover is extraordinarily rapid. And that is something that the king has to deal with, not find political favour with one way or the other, but just in his role, as we were saying, he can advise, he can warn, but that is it.
That's right. So the king has had 4 prime ministers in 4 years. So we're talking Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, Sir Keir Starmer, and now Andy Burnham. So he has had to develop and create a new relationship with 4 completely different personalities, with 4 different politicians who have different priorities, different interests. And the king will obviously have his own interests and worries and concerns and things that he cares about. So he will have to be navigating those relationships with each of those individuals. And it's fascinating to think quite how those relationships play out, perhaps more so because we just don't know anything about those audiences. And those are the key moments where the relationship between Prime Minister and monarch develop. And because we don't actually know what goes on in those audiences, there's a lot of speculation and questioning and wondering quite what it'd be like. Who was his favourite? Who did he get on with?
And of course, we see the pictures, as we saw the pictures with the Queen, of course, with Theresa May, and with Boris Johnson, and with Liz Truss. I mean, and the Queen, of course, died very soon after. Keir Starmer has now tendered his resignation. The king has accepted. Clearly, there's no question he's not going to accept it. The king has accepted. And I guess now is the time where they will just, as you say, reflect on perhaps the things that they have undertaken together. And I imagine, on a human level, what Keir Starmer will do next, where he will go with his life. Presumably stay on as an MP, we don't know, but other projects that he and the king may share.
Yes, and it may be that their relationship continues beyond him being Prime Minister. As I said, there are a number of projects, particularly around young people, around social cohesion, that Sir Keir Starmer has been working with the king on. They may well continue in a different way when he is no longer Prime Minister, when he is an MP. That won't go away. He will remain a well-known public figure who has been involved in certain projects alongside the king. So it will be a goodbye to Sir Keir Starmer today in terms of him being Prime Minister, but I suspect their relationship will continue ongoing beyond this moment as well. So it's a big moment. We know that Buckingham Palace now has confirmed that the resignation, as you say, has been received, and that has happened. He has tendered his resignation, and now there will be this time for perhaps the more informal moments of the conversation around their shared experiences that they've had together over the past couple of years, perhaps around the incoming state visit of President Trump, around some of the projects they've worked in together, visits they've made, particularly one visit to Cornwall that the King and Keir Starmer made together around social housing and the development of rural communities. So there'll be lots to talk about, as well as bringing in the family and having those conversations too.
And meanwhile, the pomp and circumstance
still goes on
outside. So, Danielle, you see this stuff all the time. Is this still the remnants of the changing of the guard?
Exactly. It's the departing guard as part of the changing, now leaving Buckingham Palace. This is what the vast amount of this crowd will be here to see.
Yes, because let's face it, the tourists, many of them, with the best will in the world, have no idea what's going on politically here. And they want to come and see the ceremony that takes place.
Exactly, and that is changing of the guard. So the crowds have been here for around 10:45 to watch the comings and goings of this version of changing of the guard, because the moment actually going on inside, this huge constitutional moment, is without colour, is without ceremony. That is a private, quiet moment, but changing of the guard is a big moment that most of the tourists are here to see.
And of course, one hates to think how hot they must be in those outfits and their bare skins.
Yeah, absolutely. They are well trained, they are very used to it. They have found themselves at all sorts of occasions, particularly recently Trooping the Colour, where it was absolutely baking hot. So they train in this heat. The horses are well practised in doing
Charles
this, and
has
it's
accepted
an absolute key part of the tourist experience.
And we have now the official picture of Keir Starmer tendering his resignation. Keir Starmer tendering it to King Charles. See, that's the Chinese drawing room. So amongst, politics can be a brutal, down, dirty business, but there they are in the very elegant surroundings of Buckingham Palace. And a very friendly picture, I'd say.
Yeah, very much so. And this is the only picture we will have of this moment. There is no video of this moment, no film of it. It's just this one solitary image of one Prime Minister saying goodbye to the monarch, which in a world where so much of it is played out live and played out visually for us, it's interesting that this incredibly important constitutional moment is just one single image. But yeah, that is effectively Sir Keir Starmer's goodbye to King Charles.
And of course, Keir Starmer will be aware that as King Charles is saying goodbye to him, King Charles is mentally preparing to welcome the next one.
Yeah, that's right. He'll be well aware of the timings, of knowing that Andy Burnham is just in the wings, ready to come into Buckingham Palace. The King also aware that he has to be somewhere as well later on this afternoon. So there'll be some timings and a timetable that he will be trying to keep to. But he also won't want to rush this moment. The King has a humanity to him, and he will understand for the Starmer family that this is an incredibly important moment. He won't want to rush it, and he will want to make sure everybody has the time they need for a degree of closure, to say goodbye and to leave this very public role.
And it's a very formal occasion. I mean, Andy Burnham, we don't usually see him suited and booted. He's normally in his dark T-shirt and dark jeans, but one assumes he's going to be anything but today when he drives in. And so is it going to be the same for him, as far as we know? Or will he drive in the main entrance, would you expect? Or because of the renovations, again, going in the North Gate, into the Luggage entrance?
Yeah. We don't know exactly which gate he will go into. It is, in this situation, it is usually the departure of the new Prime Minister that is the big moment, rather than the arrival of him
course,
here.
Because he's then on his way to Downing Street, where he'll make his speech.
Yes, exactly. So, again, that image, here we have a couple of other images here from this moment of the King and Sir Keir Starmer together, saying their goodbyes in the Chinese dining room of Buckingham Palace.
Yes, surrounded by all the gilts.
Yes.
And the pictures and the antiques. And yes, that's a very, very different call from Downing Street, isn't it? But that's, as you say, a hugely moment, and a huge important moment for Keir Starmer, but no doubt a very emotional moment for him, I would think. I mean, this has not ended as he would have wished it. I mean, Prime Ministerial life very rarely ends well. It's usually because people want you to go, and that has been the case with Keir Starmer. Of course, Andy Burnham's come in, he's not elected, but he has the support of the Labour Party for now. And we await his arrival here at Buckingham Palace, but for the moment, these are our images of the last man, the monarch, who will call Keir Starmer Prime Minister.
That's right. The King will have welcomed Sir Keir Starmer into that room, with probably a Good Morning Prime Minister becoming probably the very last person to address him in that way. I think it's also important to remember that Sir Keir Starmer announced he would be resigning around a month ago. So it may well be that the King and Sir Keir Starmer have talked about this moment during their audiences in recent weeks.
It would be odd if they hadn't.
Yes, exactly. So there will have been a degree of conversation and understanding of why this was happening and what Sir Keir Starmer's thinking has been in this moment. So it won't have just landed today. There will have perhaps been a bit of build-up between the two of them to understand what is happening. But an important personal moment for Keir Starmer, and a real show of constitutional monarchy and the role of the King in this moment as well.
And also the fact, and we've mentioned it a couple of times now, as has Clive in Downing Street, the calm, quiet transition. This is not Capitol Hill. This couldn't be further from it. This is, we've got all the tourists there. There's no sense of unrest or unease. This is, a glorious picture here, bathed in sunshine, and inside, everything is planned meticulously to the last detail. The arrival of the current Prime Minister, his resignation, his departure, and then swiftly after, possibly even less than a minute after, the arrival of the new Prime Minister. This is planned to the last detail.
Very much so. There is a real dignity in this moment, I think, which is very much what Buckingham Palace would want, and Downing Street would want as well. And perhaps that's why we haven't seen any moving pictures of it. Occasionally we do get a little bit of, we're allowed in the room for maybe 30 seconds when the King meets the Prime Minister, but not today. It's just those couple of photographs, images that we have to illustrate this important moment for Keir Starmer and for the King. And I think it allows for us to understand the importance of privacy, for Sir Keir Starmer to be able to talk freely to the King, for the King to be able to talk personally to Keir Starmer in this moment as well. Not in front of the cameras, something that happens privately, quietly, away from the rough and tumble of politics. What has been an incredibly difficult time for Sir Keir Starmer, and we know for his family, he has spoken about it. Today is dignified, it is quiet, it is reflective. That's the mood of this moment here today.
And much as we cannot know, and with good reason, about the private conversations going on between the monarch and Sir Keir Starmer, equally, Andy Burnham is around here somewhere, waiting for his moment to come. It would be wonderful to know exactly what he's thinking. Let's talk to Chris Mason at Downing Street. Chris, I mean, Andy Burnham waiting in the wings, as I say. This is... I mean, he's tried twice to be leader of his party. He is now without an election. He is about to become Prime Minister. This... I mean, you can't stress how important a moment this is for him. Chris, we can't quite reach you at the moment, so let's just stay here at Buckingham Palace for a moment. But that's certainly where attention is turning now to Andy Burnham. He'll be arriving here shortly. And again, will the process be the same, Daniela? He'll be met by the equerry. He'll be taken through to the Chinese drawing room. We expect it to be the same,
That's right, yes. He will be driven in with his family through the gates of Buckingham Palace into the main quadrangle. He will then be parked at the luggage door, this entrance that they're temporarily using because of the work that's being done on the palace.
I mean, that is a wonderful detail, isn't it? Coming in through the luggage door. You might be about to lead the nation or depart your leadership of the nation, but you're going in through the luggage door.
He will be met by Major Ben Rigby, the equerry to the King, and also, very importantly, Sir Clive Alderton, who is the King's private secretary. The Prime Minister and the King's private secretary will get to know each other very well in the weeks ahead.
And how closely do they work together? What is that relationship?
Yeah, Sir Clive Alderton, the private secretary, is the main communication between the King and his government, really. He is the person who will be liaising with his team, with Downing Street, with the Foreign Office on matters of state, on international travel, on the arrangements for the weekly audience. He is a key figure. He is himself someone who worked at the Foreign Office, was an ambassador for a number of years, so very much understands the world of international diplomacy and state matters here in the UK. So he is a very influential figure. He will welcome with the equerry Andy Burnham and his family to Buckingham Palace and take them up to the room in which they will spend some time with the King.
So we can see the scene here at Buckingham Palace with the crowds. They've seen the changing of the guard, but many crowds still here. Clearly a sense of occasion. They know that something important is happening here today. We've got the Royal Standard flying over Buckingham Palace. Earlier on it was the Union Jack, and that was taken down as the King arrived. He landed by helicopter, I believe, not far away. In the grounds of Kensington Palace, came here by car, and of course as he arrived, coming through the main gate, the Royal Standard was raised, as it always is when the monarch is here. And then at Downing Street, we see the pictures there. I mean, it all looks very quiet when you look at it from that angle. What you cannot see behind the camera is serried ranks of journalists from all around the world, all with their little spot, there you have it, all waiting for the moment when Andy Burnham is going to come out and tell us something about what his premiership will be. We've had little hints through interviews. There have been interviews with the newspapers. People close to him have come out and spoken. But we don't really have a clear idea, not only who is going to be in his cabinet, heading these great departments of state, but also quite what they will be doing. And there, again, we see the crowds at Buckingham Palace. Keir Starmer, we believe, is still within the palace. Keir Starmer, Lady Victoria and his children who we have not seen. They very carefully kept them out of the public eye, as they are doing today, no doubt as they will continue to do. But they are inside having their meeting. Is it unusual, do you think, Daniela, that it's taking this long? Or I imagine, this is a very personal moment for them, and they want to make sure that they don't rush it, and they give the moment the dignity it deserves.
Exactly.
Let's talk to Chris Mason, who's at Downing Street for us. Chris, we're waiting here as Keir Starmer, as we understand it, is still in Buckingham Palace, and then Andy Burnham will arrive here, and then soon, of course, we'll come to you and make that all-important speech with or without lectern outside number 10. But And that will be our first instance, really, of getting a clear idea of what our new Premier is about.
Yeah, that's right, Fiona, and it's a reminder, isn't it, as we look at the pictures on the screen now, of the nature of today, which is simultaneously ceremonial, deeply personal, and then, of course, political. So right now, a penny for the thoughts of the outgoing Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in conversation with the King, having just given that address that we brought you here in Downing Street, half an hour or so, 40 minutes or so ago. And then perhaps even more so, a penny for the thoughts racing through the mind of Andy Burnham right now as he anticipates heading into the palace for that conversation with the King, perhaps a moment that he may have imagined in his mind down the years. It's 16 years since we first became aware publicly and explicitly of Andy Burnham's ambition to be Prime Minister. When he first stood for the Labour leadership in 2010, he was unsuccessful then, unsuccessful again 5 years later in 2015, and successful at the third time of asking. So his ambitions to be the Prime Minister have been long-standing. They have built very, very gradually for a long time, only to suddenly happen very, very quickly in a short period of time. In fact, some of those who've been advising Andy Burnham were anticipating him having the whole summer to prepare for this moment. And because the Prime Minister, the outgoing Prime Minister Keir Starmer, decided not to contest the leadership, and because nobody else sought to contest the leadership alongside Andy Burnham, the process has been much shrivelled compared with what it might have been. And so he and a very, very close number of advisers have been working up in pretty short order their plans for government in the last couple of weeks. And now he stands on the threshold of exactly that. And within the next 45 minutes or so, he'll have completed his conversation, his appointment with the monarch, and will then head down here to where I am in Downing Street to address the country for the first time as Prime Minister. And then for him, the real work, the hard work, really begins.
Well, yes, and Chris, we understand from Buckingham Palace that Keir Starmer has now left the palace. That is the end of his political life as Prime Minister. He is now once more an MP, or he will be the moment that Andy Burnham is asked to form a government by the King. An important constitutional move. It has to take place this way. Andy Burnham will, of course, accept. And from that moment on, Andy Burnham is our new Prime Minister. So we assume, Chris, that he is waiting in the wings somewhere. He will come here to Buckingham Palace. We will see his car arrive. That audience will happen with the King, and then he is whisked straight off to Downing Street, and then the pace of life will change dramatically for him. And we are so close to him officially becoming our Prime Minister, Chris, but we still have not the clearest idea of exactly what kind of Prime Minister he is going to be.
Indeed so. So the choreography is now playing out. It's a choreography, isn't it, that we've become very familiar with in recent years, which has been the frequency of prime ministerial turnover. He'll head in to be invited by the King to form a government, having been recommended by the outgoing Prime Minister as being the person who can command a majority in the House of Commons. That's what gives the Prime Minister the capacity to govern, and frankly, in the end, that's what did for Keir Starmer, because his own side concluded that they wanted rid of him. And then, as you say, Andy Burnham will come here to Downing Street. He has been, partly because of circumstance and that shrunken timetable I was talking about, but also because of a strategic decision to do it this way, he has been very limited in what he's been saying in the last few weeks. He's done very, very few interviews. His public appearances have been rationed as well. We learned, courtesy of an interview that he gave to the Times this morning, to Patrick Maguire, that there were just 3 people involved in what are known as the access talks that the incoming Burnham administration had with the civil service. So it was Andy Burnham himself, it was James Pennell, his Chief of Staff, and Louise Haigh, the former Cabinet Minister who's been very close to Andy Burnham in recent months. I know from talking to Cabinet Ministers in the last week or so, and indeed more recently than that, that plenty of them have been in the dark about their own prospects, their own future, either in the job that they are still just about currently doing, or any job that they may subsequently doing. be doing. And Andy Burnham's been painting in pretty broad brushstrokes. We've heard, haven't we, about his desire for greater devolution. This idea that Number 10 will have a office in Manchester, Number 10 North. I suspect we'll see the new Prime Minister, as he soon will be, visiting there in the coming days. We've had a sense about his commitment to social care in England, talking very movingly in that interview in the Times this morning about his father, Roy, a lifelong Labour man living with Alzheimer's, unaware that his son is about to become a Labour Prime Minister. And then also a tax detail that we were talking about with Clive a little earlier that Andy Burnham has talked about. I say a detail, it's hugely significant and comes with a huge bill potentially, which is this idea that the personal allowance, the amount of money you can earn before you start paying income tax, in Andy Burnham's view has been static, has been frozen for too long. So to what extent might he be able to shift that, and with what consequence and with what trade-offs elsewhere? But that's almost the sum total, really, of what we've had from Andy Burnham. How much does he develop that argument here in Downing Street in the next hour? Incidentally, we think he may do that without the lectern that we saw the Prime Minister, the outgoing Prime Minister, speaking at in the last hour. And then to what extent over the next week or so do we start getting additional details from Andy Burnham? The expectation is that he will seek to hit the ground running, and we will see and hear a lot of him and his new cabinet in the coming days and then in the next week or so.
So, Chris, we can see Andy Burnham's car now arriving down the Mall. We could hear the whistles of the police before we saw the car. The north gate to Buckingham Palace has been opened in preparation for his arrival. Police holding up the traffic. And there we see the convoy and the police escorts as Andy Burnham makes his way into Buckingham Palace, where the King will ask him to form a government. This is a big moment for our country, of course. This is our new Prime Minister in that car in the middle, one assumes. But also it's a massive moment for Andy Burnham. And this is something that one gathers from sources that he has been preparing for more than a few months. And this moment has come. So, Daniela, look here, we see him coming into the, same as the quadrangle here. Look, we can see some of those renovations taking place you've been talking about. But he comes here into the quadrangle. The gravel has all been swept, as in preparation for his arrival.
To hear the crunch of the tyres on that gravel in the quad, and just to emphasise the speed at which things move here as well. We have had the official statement from Buckingham Palace about the last audience, just to say the Right Honourable Sir Keir Starmer MP had an audience with the King this morning and tendered his resignation as Prime Minister. Lady Starmer was also received by the King. That moment is now past, and here we are.
Here is Andy Burnham with his wife, Marie-France Van Heel.
That's right, being met there by the equerry to the King in the uniform, Major Ben Rigby, and their Sir Clive Alderton, the private secretary to the King, who is directing them in through the luggage door from the quadrangle into Buckingham Palace for this new phase in their public life, politically and personally. They will go to the Chinese dining room here in Buckingham Palace. We're told one of the most ornately decorated rooms in the palace, which is temporarily being used as the audience room. In that room, Andy Burnham will meet the King. The King will ask him if he is able to form a government. Andy Burnham will say yes, and that will be it. He will be Prime Minister, and there will then be some time for the two men to chat. You would think about priorities, about Andy Burnham's plans,
Andy Burnham
Prime Minister.
I mean, it's possible, Danielle, that the King may be the first person to find out who's going to be in the cabinet. Because as Chris has been saying, as we all know, it's been a closely guarded secret.
They've been meeting and they will go inside anti-transport as conversation to form a government. And Andy Burnham will say yes, and he will become our brand new Prime Minister.
And now the King is going to have a conversation, as you say, about his priorities, perhaps the direction of government, how they might work together. So he will probably be the first person to hear the kind of details that we will later find out.
Yes, it's hard to imagine that the King would not be asking him about the formation of his cabinet, about his thinking, about how close he is to having that complete and ready to announce. That is just the kind of thing that the two men will talk about. They aren't two people who are particularly familiar with one another. Yes, their paths have crossed during their own public lives. Andy Burnham, when he was previously as Secretary of State, now as Prime Minister, there have been moments where we have seen them together, but they don't know each other well. So this is what we are seeing here, and what is going on now behind the palace walls will be the start of a new, very important relationship in British public life.
And Chris Mason in Downing Street, I mean, for Andy Burnham, as we've said, twice he's tried to be Labour leader. He is now going to be Prime Minister in very short order, and this has happened very quickly, perhaps more quickly than he might have wanted it. You were saying he perhaps might have wanted the summer to prepare for this. How important a moment is this for him personally?
It's a huge personal moment, isn't it, this, for Andy Burnham? You saw him there with his wife. Just rewind a handful of months and remember the Labour Party that he now leads barred him from being the Labour Party's candidate in a by-election, that by-election in Gorton and Denton in Greater Manchester, which the Green Party went on to win. And here we are a matter of months later, and he's in conversation with the King, being asked to form a government. Within the next half an hour or so, perhaps 35 minutes, he'll be a little over or round about a mile away here in Downing Street, addressing the country for the first time as Prime Minister, then heading into Downing Street and writing those letters of last resort that are handed over to the commanders of the UK's nuclear armed submarines, and the gravity of office will descend upon him. It's a reflection that so many of the prime ministerial memoirs reflect upon, that within moments of getting behind the black door in Downing Street, when the likes of you and I are still in conversation about what we've just witnessed, that is what confronts a prime minister. And that's before they get to the difficult political business of having to sack cabinet ministers from the previous administration that they don't seek to retain, and then the more joyous moments, if you like, of calling people in to take on those senior jobs in a new government. But yeah, a collision of the constitutional, the personal and the political, all happening at once. And for Andy Burnham, this moment he has long dreamed of, happening, but as I say, happening rather quicker than he might have imagined. That has meant something of a sprint in the last couple of weeks, principally taking place away from the cameras, as he's tried to knock together what his government might look like and what might be viable to deliver in office in the first weeks and months, and then begin the process, as he has been doing, of assembling that team that will be unveiled one by one in the coming hours. We expect the key appointments to his cabinet, the most senior positions, Chancellor, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, probably from mid-afternoon onwards. Further appointments taking place into the evening tonight, and then the many appointments to the more junior ranks of his government tomorrow.
And Daniela, just looking again, those pictures of Andy Burnham arriving with his wife, and he will be the UK's 59th, I think, Prime Minister. And as you say, he's met King Charles before, when the King was Prince of Wales, as Culture Minister, as Health Minister, as Mayor of Manchester. He was at the coronation. They've had a number of events together. But they will now have a different relationship, because every week they are going to be meeting after Prime Minister's questions, and obviously Andy Burnham will hope that his relationship with the King is going to last rather longer than Keir Starmer's did. But these are two men who are going to have to work well together.
Yeah, and it's interesting watching these pictures again there, the warm handshake from Sir Clive Alderton, the King's Private Secretary. He will be an absolute key figure in the relationship between King and Prime Minister, because Sir Clive is the King's closest personal, private advisor. He will know the King's thinking. He will know what interests him. He knows how to navigate the relationship between the royal household and Downing Street. So he will be a key figure in the formation of this new relationship between King and Prime Minister. It's interesting to see him being the first person really who greets the new Prime Minister as he enters Buckingham Palace today. But an incredibly powerful personal moment for Andy Burnham and his wife going in to Buckingham Palace today. When he leaves that Chinese dining room, having had his audience with the King will say goodbye, Prime Minister. I mean, that in itself, just those,
that's a moment.
Few words are a real moment for any individual, and particularly for someone who has spent so much time in public life and in politics, it is a real moment for him to know that it has been a personal ambition of his for such a long time, to see it play out as we will do today. And when we were talking earlier about when you read any memoir or biography of any past British Prime Minister, this short amount of time that they spent here at Buckingham Palace in this moment is just so important for them personally, as a family, politically. It's the moment that they take office, really, that they officially become Prime Minister, and it has such impact as you would imagine. And just in terms of some of the timings as well, that we know that Sir Keir Starmer, we think, was inside with the King for around half an hour from beginning to end, so perhaps
we'll go down the road
than we thought, but there was no fixed time on this, and the King will not wanted to have rushed Sir Keir and his family in this moment. And then around 7 minutes or so between Sir Keir Starmer leaving, I think, and Andy Burnham arriving here. So a few minutes there, but the King, as I said, has to have these engagements outside of London this afternoon. So he will want to...
But Andy Burnham has got a big
possible.
Yeah, very business.
Yeah.
This afternoon he'll be a President's Cabinet. We've got no idea who will be in his top team yet. We don't know whether Andy Burnham will keep
49
Rachel Reeves as the Chancellor. He may feel
for the job,
but he might not want a female Chancellor in his top team. He might go for a male Chancellor.
And other than the King asking Andy Burnham to form the next government, that form of words, as far as we can tell, I mean, these conversations are private. We can speculate to a certain extent, and based on what previous Prime Ministers have said. How does the conversation pan out?
Yeah, I mean, initially there will obviously be a conversation about whether Andy Burnham is able to form a government. Now, this is the very first question that is asked by the King. The formalities of the conversation is how things will start. But then it will move much more, I think, to the more personal political perspective. What are his priorities going to be? Where is he at with the formation of his cabinet? What is his intent for the next few months? How does he feel about the role? So you can expect the King is a great small talker as well. It's a sort of it's part of the job, part of the role. But he will have some direct questions he will want to ask, and he will have his own political interest that perhaps he will want to discuss with Andy Burnham. Maybe not at length today. That's not what today really is for. It's an introductory meeting, a chance to forge the start of this new relationship they will have as monarch and Prime Minister. One that will then be built on with the weekly audiences that happen on a Wednesday over the course of Andy Burnham's premiership. Also, we're heading into the summer break now. The King will begin his own summer holidays later on this week, where he will head to Scotland and stay on the Balmoral estate. And actually, at the end of August, beginning of September, there is usually a weekend where the Prime Minister and their family come to Balmoral, are hosted by the King and Queen there. So that will
referred to as a dine and sleep over, which I found rather charming.
Yes, exactly. So there will be a weekend where Andy Burnham and his family usually will be invited to Balmoral, and you would think that would be an opportune moment for the two men to really get to know each other better, to get an understanding of who they are and what their interests are, heading into the autumn term and the busyness of public office once Parliament is back and once the King is back to regular engagements.
Yes, I remember Tony Blair, or was it Cherie Blair, talking about the staying at Balmoral. There are a number of details, probably best not to go into at this time of day, but and the famous barbecues and this like the surreal nature of all that.
I mean, many people will perhaps have seen it watching The Crown. There is a whole episode devoted to a Balmoral weekend with the Prime Minister. And, yeah, I mean, you would have to, Andy Burnham and his family will have to understand the niceties of a country weekend in Scotland with the King and Queen. There will be routines and rhythms and choreography to how that works. But I'm sure the King will want to make him and his family feel welcome. And it is a moment to really get to know each other a little bit and get to understand who you both are as individuals and what your priorities are.
And there's an element of that today, isn't it? I'm struck by the fact, well, Keir Starmer arrived with his family and Andy Burnham has arrived with his wife. I imagine there will be conversations about how family life is going to change, how their personal circumstances are going to change.
Yeah, 100%. The King will be very much interested in that personal aspect. I think, when are you moving? Exactly where will you be living? What about your children? Andy Burnham's children are in their 20s.
Here we
have it.
It is something uncanny about it, Daniela, isn't it? They're in the same room King Charles on the right, Andy Burnham on the left, just as it was with Keir Starmer. But here we have the moment after the resignation, the welcoming of Andy Burnham as Prime Minister. That's, for Andy Burnham, one cannot underestimate what that must feel like. Chris, I mean, this is something that Andy Burnham, I think it's not too much to say he's probably dreamt of.
Yeah, that's the moment, isn't it? Andy Burnham becoming Prime Minister. As you say, it is quite something, seeing that image in exactly the same spot, against exactly the same backdrop as the now former Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, was in just a handful of minutes ago. Seeing the smile there on Andy Burnham's face, an ambition for much of his adult life to one day be the leader of the Labour Party, and yes, so he hoped, the Prime Minister. The last two times, he contested the Labour leadership, it was to become leader of the opposition. This time, no contests, no rivals for the Labour leadership position, and at a time when Labour were in government. So in just that matter of days from becoming Labour leader on Friday, there he is in Buckingham Palace, becoming our fifth Prime Minister in 4 years. And whatever is to come, as Keir Starmer has reflected in the last couple of weeks, whatever is to come for Andy Burnham in the coming weeks, months and years, this a moment, and the moments to come in Downing Street here in the next half hour or so, that he will forever reflect upon, no doubt, at a personal level, with a deep sense of pride. But the hard work about to begin. He does have a couple more ceremonial moments, if you like, both the remaining conversation that's currently ongoing with the King, and then a brief moment of respite in the car as he travels down the Mall and then down Whitehall to Downing Street. And when he gets here, Fiona, what I can tell you is a gathering of Andy Burnham's keenest personal supporters are just gathering at the bottom of Downing Street. It'll be interesting to see if they are choreographically assembled in a similar way to the semicircle that gathered behind Keir Starmer an hour or so ago. It'll also be interesting to see if there are any overlapping names. In other words, those who were invited to Keir Starmer's departure and Andy Burnham's arrival. I suspect quite a few will have only had an invite to one of those two occasions rather than both, although I am told there is a little bit of overlap. Will be intriguing to see how much of a Mancunian flavour there is in that welcoming party for Andy Burnham. But yes, that conversation with the monarch ongoing, that brief bit of respite on a very short car journey down just a couple of streets, 3 streets in total I suppose, the Mall, Whitehall and Downing Street, before we hear from Andy Burnham as Prime Minister for the first time here in Downing Street in the next 20 minutes or so.
And Chris, we're seeing more pictures now of that moment of Andy Burnham, our Prime Minister, and King Charles in the Chinese drawing room. Wreathed in smiles. This is such a moment for Andy Burnham, as you say. And I wonder, Chris, if you feel, as he's going to hit the ground running when he gets to you in Downing Street, just 3 streets away, as you pointed out. This is the calm before the storm, if you like.
It is, yeah, and the beginnings, just seeing those series of images that we're looking at on screen now, the beginnings of what will be a crucial relationship for Andy Burnham, as it is for every Prime Minister, that relationship between Prime Minister and monarch, that source of wisdom and longevity that the King brings to politics and diplomacy, having granted only been king for a handful of years, albeit with a good number of prime ministers now, but his time as Prince of Wales before that. But crucially, as you and Daniela have been reflecting, the sanctity of the relationship that a prime minister and a monarch have, those weekly audiences where a prime minister can be utterly candid about the political scenarios that they are wrestling with, knowing, perhaps unlike any other conversation they have with almost anyone, that the nature of that conversation, the content of that conversation won't leak to folk like me and others, that the King can be there as a sounding board and a source of advice without any wider political axe to grind. But yes, to come to your question, Fiona, that sense of wanting to hit the ground running. Yes, his team have been making clear to me and others that is absolutely his desire. I think they are aware that they, in their guarded approach to the last few weeks in terms of their public statements and appearances, that they need to contrast that once he is in office with being seen and seen frequently, audibly and visibly around the UK. I suspect he'll be out and about around the UK in pretty short order in the next couple of days. And then trying to walk the balancing line, the tightrope of delivering within the scope of Labour's manifesto, which gave them their mandate to govern a couple of years ago, whilst being distinctive, whilst proving, as he hopes to be able to offer something different. And then, and this is always the balancing act as well, how do you promise something that gets you noticed, that raises the prospects and the popularity of the Labour Party, which has been rock bottom and contributed to Keir Starmer's demise, whilst at the same time not creating too big a gap between expectation and rhetoric in these opening, quite heady days for a new Prime Minister, and actually the capacity to deliver. That is a tricky old challenge that will confront Andy Burnham straight away.
And just looking at these pictures of Buckingham Palace bathed in glorious sunshine. Daniela, you're still with me here, and we've had confirmation, I mean, as if confirmation were needed, really, of what's taken place in the meeting.
Yeah, what we've had, Fiona, is a formal notice as well from Buckingham Palace that this meeting has happened. If I just read it to you from the Palace, it says, His Majesty received in audience the Right Honourable Andrew Burnham MP and requested him to form a new administration. The Right Honourable Andrew Burnham MP accepted the King's offer and kissed hands upon his appointment as Prime Minister and First Lord of the Treasury. Miss Marie-France Van Heel was also received by His Majesty. So that is the confirmation from Buckingham Palace that Andy Burnham is now Prime Minister. That moment described as the kissing of hands. There is no kissing of hands.
Let's be clear about that in case people are wondering.
It's just it's a traditional turn of phrase that harks back to moments in history that no longer happen. But it is a handshake, as we have seen in these photos we're now looking at here. It is a conversation between a monarch and his new Prime Minister. That is what is going on now. We are expecting Andy Burnham to be leaving here, Prime Minister Burnham to be leaving Buckingham Palace shortly. And when he says his goodbyes here in the Chinese dining room of Buckingham Palace, where the audience is happening, a temporary room that is being used while the palace is having some work done, it will be the King and perhaps those from the royal household that greet him will be the first people to address Andy Burnham as Prime Minister.
And what a moment that will be for him. And just as Keir Starmer, our former Prime Minister, left through the back entrance, I mean, saying he wasn't coming out the front, we assume that our new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, will come out the front with all the pomp and splendour, the full convoy for everybody here to see.
I think so. The crowd has dispersed a little outside the palace now after changing of the guard, but I can see from my position here with you, Fiona, the police outriders lining up ready for when Andy Burnham's, Prime Minister Burnham's vehicles leave Buckingham Palace, and we are expecting them to escort him with
I'm going to take you back to when Andy Burnham won the election. we're just going to take you back to Andy Burnham won the Makerfield by-election. He won that election a month ago. We're just going to take you back to when he won that. He gave his first speech back when he won the election. So we're just going to take you back to when he won that election.
Firstly, can I thank everybody who has worked so hard to make this election run so smoothly and so safely. Thank you very much, everybody. And can I say to my fellow candidates, yes, all of you, can I say to you all, thank you for at least a civil debate between us. If not everything going on around the election, we managed that, and that's really important. Everyone knows that politics isn't working. Everyone can feel that the country isn't where it should be. Tonight just could, be the turning point. From here on, I will give everything I have got to make it so, to ensure the name Makerfield is forever synonymous with bringing about the change this country needs. Bringing back something we've lost, hope for the future. I am proud that this place has shone in the world's spotlight these last 5 weeks. And the warmth, humour and hospitality of its people has been on show for all to see. It will never be a stepping stone to me, but instead will be my touchstone, a Makerfield test at the heart of British politics, will ensure the places Westminster has neglected will now get fairness. I spoke in the campaign about the need to change politics. I promised to lead by example from the front as your Member of Parliament. I know people who traditionally vote for the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, and perhaps more recently, in May, for Reform UK, have given me their support in this election. I will always have respect to them for that, and out of respect for them, I will always take a place first rather than a party first approach, and I will focus on problem solving rather than point scoring, and I will work hard after this by-election to heal the divisions of this campaign, and let it be really understood that I will be your MP however you voted. When this borough went to the polls in May, it made a loud cry for change. In this campaign, we have begun to answer that. But I do say to my own party, this is a final chance to change. This is what people said directly to me on the hundreds of doorsteps that I stood on. We must hear it. We must act upon it, and we must get it right. There will be no second chance. But it is a chance now, from this result tonight, to build a new politics based on unity and hope, turning away from the path that takes us to a divided, dark politics of the kind we see in the United States. We must now take this path and put this country back on the right path and bring people back together and get things working properly again. It is with some sadness that this result brings an end to my wonderful 9 years as Mayor of Greater Manchester. This city region has given so much to me, and it is a wrench to leave the job I love. But I am not leaving the service of Greater Manchester. I've always been clear that it can't achieve everything it should be, and we can't close the north-south divide, and we can't make all the great English cities be what they should be without big change at the national level. I always knew one day I would seek to go back to Westminster to complete that unfinished business, so that Makerfield and Greater Manchester and the north of England can fulfil their potential. And I will forever be grateful to the people here, the people of the wonderful places that make up this constituency, the proud places that always have deserved so much more. I will forever be grateful to them that they have given me the chance to go back and make this country work for Makerfield, and the many places like it across the country who have been neglected, who feel that the country works for other people in other places but not for them. And that changes tonight. This result changes that. This result will bring about a country that works fairly for everywhere and for everybody. People here have voted for change. They have voted for more power for the North and everywhere forgotten by Westminster. They have voted for hope. Now let's give that back to them. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
So that was a moment for Andy Burnham won for Makerfield by-election just over a month ago.
Our monarch and
So we're going to go back because very shortly Andy Burnham will be giving his first speech to the nation.
position and was Mayor of Manchester. But the first meeting they have where, for the King, Andy Burnham is going to play such an important role.
That's right, and I have over the past couple of days been trying to look into whether Andy Burnham has ever said anything about monarchy before, about how he views the royal family, and he hasn't said very much at all about it. It's hard to get a sense of it, but there have been some official statements when he was Mayor of Manchester that he made about monarchy, particularly after the death of Queen Elizabeth II, where he talked about her providing consistency for the British people, and that her, as Queen, as monarch, defined what it is to be British. So perhaps you get a sense that he looks rather favourably on the role of the royal family in public life. After the coronation as well, he spoke about building strong bonds of friendship with the King, particularly around the King's relationship with Manchester, with Greater Manchester. But again, the flavour of his public comments around the royal family have generally been quite positive, with him having a view that they have the capacity to enhance the reputation of Britain and to enhance public life. So the mood is that he has generally a positive feeling towards the royal family, but we will learn much more about that as the relationship between King and Prime Minister evolves.
And how important is it that the King has a favourable view of the Prime Minister? Does that matter at the end of the day?
I don't know that it matters, but I think it makes life feel a lot easier if they have a good working relationship, that they can have honest, robust exchanges that are kept private, that the King can voice his concerns, that he can learn more about the running of government. And I think it adds to the sense of a stable monarchy if there is a strong, solid, challenging relationship between King and Prime Minister. They won't always agree, of course. They are two men from very different backgrounds with very different perspectives, but there is clearly some common ground around social cohesion, around multi-faith communities, that they will definitely find some common interests and some areas where they can work together.
Such a contrast between the images we're seeing here. Downing Street, the serried ranks of journalists, of people from inside Number 10, of supporters of the new Prime Minister, all there waiting with a great sense of anticipation. And here, the calm at Buckingham Palace. You've got the tourists here, but their numbers have mostly thinned out because they were predominantly here to see the changing of the guard, and then suddenly were treated to this constitutional handover, if you like, as the police convoy arrived with Keir Starmer and the Outriders and all the grandeur of that. And then this little door at Buckingham Palace, and the moment that Andy Burnham walks out that door is the first glimpse that we will all have of Andy Burnham as Prime Minister. And then when he makes his very short way to Downing Street, just 2-3 streets away, we will get our first perhaps proper sense of what Andy Burnham as Prime Minister means for all of us. And that's presumably, Chris, there at Downs, I can see Steve Rotherham again with his grandchild so proudly displayed. But that's what everyone is waiting for there at Downs. Not only to cheer on the bloke they support, of course, but to get a clearer sense of what's coming down the track for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely right. So people here have their smartphones out. They're doing selfies in and amongst the crowd. It's a rather thicker crowd, broader crowd numerically than those that we saw gathered for Keir Starmer's departure. As I say, there are one or two overlaps of advisors who are being kept on from one administration into the next. I think we just spotted Andy Burnham's mum here. Who else did we see? We saw Peter Reid, the footballer. He was involved and photographed with Andy Burnham during the by-election campaign in the Makerfield constituency a couple of months ago. Dale Vince, the Labour supporter, I think he's wearing a T-shirt that says "Chips are vegan." He's just turned his back to me, so I can't quite read it. I think it says chips are vegan, which I guess they are, aren't they? So the crowd gathered, expecting to see their man, to see the new Prime Minister in the next few minutes.
Yes, well, we all wait with anticipation to see quite when he will come out of Buckingham Palace. As Danielle, as you say, there's someone with a stopwatch time on this. Can there be no sense of favouritism, longer or shorter with the outgoing Prime Minister and longer or shorter with the incoming Prime Minister? So, yes, people getting ready. I suspect that man was coming out to check that the cameras are recording. Yes, they are. We are all here waiting for that moment. And I suspect for Andy Burnham, only this, walking out of the palace outside this gloriously named luggage door is not going to be the moment. But having had that meeting with the King, being asked formally by the monarch to form a government, that is a moment he is never going to forget.
No, I mean, a hugely important moment for him politically and personally, for both him and his family. And actually, when he emerges from that luggage door there, it will be a very quiet moment. There aren't that many people in the quadrangle of Buckingham Palace. There'll be a little bit of peace. He'll be aware of the helicopter that is above us here. But the moment the vehicles drive out of the central gates through the main gates of Buckingham Palace onto the Mall, he'll see the people. He'll get a sense of going to Downing Street to deliver his first speech as Prime Minister. And I suspect it will very much come home to him, just the power of this political moment. But the King, for him personally, a chance for him, as we have talked again and again about this establishing of a new relationship, an important one that will be so key to both the King and to the Prime Minister in the months ahead.
You also get a feeling, Daniela, that politics is a dirty business. It gets down and dirty. But when you're Prime Minister, you come to Buckingham Palace and you're surrounded by the grandeur and the tradition and the centuries of history of the building. You emerge from here, you drive down the Mall, past the flags, past the Clarence House, past the grand buildings. I wonder if that's the moment where it really sinks in and you think, right, this is it now.
I think especially for a man who prides himself on his informality and perhaps not being so impressed by these...
And here he is, Daniela.
Here he is, Sir Clive Alderton leading out the new Prime Minister and his wife, Andy Burnham, the new Prime Minister, waving to those collected in the quad of Buckingham Palace. He will now be driven out. Major Ben Rigby there, saying goodbye to the new Prime Minister and his wife, and Sir Clive Alderton, the private secretary of the King, saying their goodbyes, and into the vehicle they go. Andy Burnham, the new Prime Minister, was inside for 35 minutes, so just a touch longer than Keir Starmer was there.
But let's not. Who's counting? Who's counting, Daniela? Yes.
So very similar times that they spent inside the Chinese dining room inside Buckingham Palace for that audience with the King. And the vehicles now pull out, the police outriders prepare as the new Prime Minister leaves Buckingham Palace.
Yes, we wait for his car to emerge from the quadrangle. We will see that any minute as it comes out. And there are the police outriders holding back the traffic, holding back the tourists, and here comes the convoy of cars, gleaming in this warm sunshine as Andy Burnham, Prime Minister Burnham, makes his way to Downing Street. There we see the cars departing at some speed, it has to be said, through the traffic, leaving Buckingham Palace. outriders speeding past. A red traffic light, but that's not a problem for them. They can go straight through it, down the Mall. There we see it. Through the parks on either side. It is a glorious sight, it has to be said, as they make their way. Take what, 2 minutes possibly? As they come down the Mall, they'll be making their way towards Admiralty Arch. And there we have the 3 cars with the Prime Minister in the middle and the police outrider, another police car at the very back, escorting them through the traffic, such as it is, not waiting for traffic lights. They don't have to worry with that as Prime Minister. And now they will make their way just a little bit further along the Mall as they approach Admiralty Arch. Admiralty Arch, which of course was part of the Department of Defence. It's now a hotel actually, but it was an important government building until relatively recently. Andy Burnham and his wife sitting in the car, no doubt reflecting on the meeting they've just had with the monarch. Chris, I could hear the cheers. They've obviously realised there that Andy Burnham has come out of Buckingham Palace and they're all agog to see him there.
Indeed so, yeah. So the crowd here absorbing the fact that their man, Andy Burnham, is the Prime Minister of the UK and is now just a matter of moments away. We're keeping an eye on the Downing Street gates, halfway down Whitehall, manned, as you know, by police, armed police, 24 hours a day. They will be keenly aware that the motorcade will be heading down Whitehall any moment, and Andy Burnham, I guess, keeping an eye on what he's about to say, because the absence of a lectern means that he won't be reading his speech from notes, which is the convention. He will be talking from whatever he has memorised. So perhaps, Clive, I guess, a chance for him to quickly check those notes before he's addressing us in just a moment or so.
Indeed. Fiona and Daniela at Buckingham Palace, many thanks for that. Talked a lot about changing of the guard over there. It is literally a changing of the guard. We now have a new Prime Minister who will be arriving here in the next couple of minutes or so. Yes, as Fiona was suggesting, going through red lights, not a problem there. Thumbs up for one of the photographers, just
2
making
minutes,
sure
I think that was.
that seems to be the 2-minute call. And of course, when he arrives here and he goes through those gates, he will be greeted by the smiling faces of so many of the people that he's worked with over the last few years up in
Andy Burnham is
Manchester.
on his
People
way
who have
to
been with him
Downing
from the very
Street.
beginning
A
of this
brand new
new
Prime
political
Minister
journey. Remember, he
is
did
2
serve,
minutes away.
in the administrations
Andy
of Tony
Burnham is
Blair
just
and
under
Gordon
2
Brown.
minutes away
He's,
from number
he's
10 Downing
used
Street,
to
where he will
coming to
make
number
his
10, but
first
certainly not for the
speech
last
as
few
PM.
years. But now he is coming as top dog, literally. And so he will see the people here lined up along the street here, wishing him well. And some of these people could well be working with him in the new administration. Chris, I'm struck by the speed of all of this. The fact that literally a month ago, he was a mayor of a local city, but
The gates are opening at the bottom of Downing Street. You can hear a cheer in Whitehall. The lead Range Rover coming through those gates leading the motorcade into the street. You can see the police outriders
Here he
behind
comes.
trio of cars, I think, coming down towards the base of the street. A thumbs up from the Mayor of the Liverpool City Region, Steve Rotherham, clutching his grandchild, as we mentioned. The car door about to open with the new Prime Minister in that Range Rover, and Clive, he'll be wandering up to the microphone shortly and no doubt greeted by cheers. Here he comes.
Here he comes. Andy Burnham, our new Prime Minister, has arrived here in Downing Street. Here he is with his wife.
By his wife, Marie France, stopping to greet some of the.
You can hear the cheers here in number 10 for Andy Burnham, a brand new Prime Minister. With his wife, he's getting a fantastic ovation from these people that have waited and waited for this moment. I think Andy Burnham's been waiting, Chris, for this moment to happen.
Formal dress for the new Prime Minister on this occasion.
He is going to give his first speech as PM very shortly, I imagine, here.
What a moment for the new Prime Minister to soak up. Previous Prime Ministers have said for all of the difficulties that come in office after this moment, this is one to cherish on a human, on a family level, with those who helped bring this moment about. Rosie Winterson there, the veteran Labour figure, being greeted by... Burnham.
Chris Mason, I think he's going to this evening. Chris, what a moment this is. What a red cooking, what a massive moment this is. For Mr. Andy Burnham and for his wife, as they come forward here.
The MP, now former MP, who gave up his seat in Makerfield in Greater Manchester in order for Andy Burnham to run as an MP, clearing his path for this moment.
As you can see, many people shaking the hand of Andy Burnham and shaking the hand of Mr. Burnham's wife to as they arrive here in number 10 in the seat. He's finally here.
As a mayor, that's right, embraces a former mayor.
That's right. We've got Peter Reid, the footballer, who campaigned for him in Makerfield, in the white jacket there. Became leader of the Labour Party just last week, now he's Prime Minister with the keys to number 10, and he's about to give his first speech as leader of the United Kingdom.
So Andy Burnham, just as a month ago, had won the Makerfield by-election. He won that just a month ago. And on the 22nd of June 2026, Sir Keir Starmer resigned as Prime Minister. And Andy Burnham got a train down from Greater Manchester and was sworn in as an MP from Makerfield, but now has become our brand new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham is going to give his first speech. Andy Burnham, our Prime Minister. Here we go, Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham giving his first speech as PM. Let's listen to what Mr. Andy Burnham has got to say as Prime Minister.
I have just come from Buckingham Palace, where I have accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government. In doing so, I am acutely conscious that I am the 6th person in the last 10 years to walk up this street, the 7th Prime Minister since 2016, making this a moment for reflection and new resolution. It requires my generation of politicians to raise our game and rise to the new challenge. Britain needs to show the world that we can regain our stability once again. And that is our challenge, to make politics work, to make it work better. I know people at home are fed up with politics. I hear you, and I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough, and we need to be better. We will be. We will make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain, bringing forward the biggest changes in the last 40 years. A new political model and a new economic model. In the 1980s, Britain took some wrong turns. Political power was centralised, economic power privatised, large parts of the country deindustrialised, and they still haven't recovered. Many feel as though they're still in decline, and they don't have the ability to turn things around. And that's why we will change politics, to make it more collaborative, more about problem solving than point scoring. And we will take power out of here and carry it into every postcode in the land so that they can do more. And in doing more, build a new economy where we put life's essentials back under stronger public control to make them affordable to you again. Reindustrialising Britain, using public procurement to back British industry. Later this year, I will bring forward a new plan for Britain, a 10-year plan, laying out a path from where we are now to where I believe we all want Britain to be, wherever we're coming from, whatever party we support. But I can do something to give people some breathing space now, some help with the cost of living. And I will set out some of those measures starting tomorrow, including how we pay for them. We will help more young people into work by changing the education system and giving them more support, more mental health support. And we will build more council homes. That is the fair and sustainable way to bring the welfare bill down, to meet our fiscal rules and to honour our commitments on defence to our international partners. We will help people to live well, building a more preventative state, investing in people's success rather than paying for failure. And that work starts now. I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country. It's about putting the right values and the right standards at the heart of government. I will put the care of people at the heart of everything I do. I will give this my all, and I ask you all to pull with me. Let's build a new national sense of unity, of common purpose and positivity. Let us make this the moment when Britain starts to believe again, the moment we bring back hope. Thank you very much, everybody.
Prime Minister there greeting some of his supporters here who've come down from Manchester, and a speech with no notes where he talked about a 10-year plan, a new strategy for Britain. He talked about creating a new economic and political model for Britain, and that this was a circuit breaker moment for the nation, a change to the way things have gone that will reverberate down the years. Chris Mason is with me now. Chris,
just the image we were just seeing there, Clive, is the Prime Minister embracing his mum. So talking to his mum there, standing proudly on the steps of 11 Downing Street as Andy Burnham completes his greeting of his supporters to our left of the door of Downing Street before he heads in through the main door. Turns out we were just getting in the way of the camera shot there, so we're ducking out of the way. Very shortly, we should see the new Prime Minister with his wife walk through the doors of number 10 for the first time. Here it comes.
Here he goes. Andy Burnham and his wife are about to enter the doors of number 10 Downing Street. Here they go.
A kiss for his wife, very
Here they go. Off they go into number 10 Downing Street. Here he goes.
and the floors inside, greeted by the Cabinet Secretary, who will introduce him to the staff of his new home. So, there you have it. There he is inside. On his first day, the first moments of his premiership, a project that he says is the beginning of a 10-year strategy to completely remake British politics and to fashion a new economic model. Annabelle Tiffin is with me here. Annabelle, you're our Northwest of England political editor. This is a moment not just for the new Prime Minister, but also for these people who've been with him every step of the way.
And I was really having a good look. I was waving to a few people because when you work in the region a lot, you do know these people. And, you know, you obviously had Steve Rotherham there with his 10-week-old grandson. You had people like Rose Marley, who's worked with him for years. Kevin Lee, who's his advisor, who's really got him to where he's been to today. Arun Shah, who's the Oldham Council leader until a little while ago. So, yes, some of these people have been with him from the very, very start. And it was really emotional for them.
Andy Burnham was talking about a 10-year plan for Britain.
Trying to get to here for certainly a few months. Finally walk through that door.
He also wants to create
it's a big thing for the
economy
Northwest.
models,
Whatever your politics, we now have a
economy
Northwest
models.
Prime Minister, which we haven't had for more than
that's
50
what
years.
he's talking
So
about.
it's a big deal for our region. It really is.
He talked about one of the first things he was going to do as soon as he got
just heard from Andy Burnham
was to
himself.
institute some kind of strategy, some kind of new policy on rough sleeping.
Yeah.
How much of a problem has that been in Manchester? We know it's a problem in all of our
He has talked about creating a 10-year plan for Britain. He wants to create a political and economy models for people.
Percentage still does. I don't know if he still will, but he gave a percentage of his wage to help rough sleepers. And he did say he was going to eradicate rough sleeping. I think he said it by 2020 initially, but that hasn't happened.
So this was up in Manchester?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was one of his first pledges as Greater Manchester Mayor, was to eradicate rough sleeping. It hasn't happened. There is still a problem with rough sleeping. It has gone down in numbers, but it hasn't been eradicated. So it's interesting. I found that quite interesting that he made that one of his first pledges to do it on a national scale. I mean, it's huge.
Absolutely.
Say that.
Given the fact that, as you say, it hasn't been as successful as yet under the timetable that he set himself up in Manchester. I mean, is he setting himself up for what?
It's difficult, isn't it? Well, that's why I was quite surprised he said it, because it is one of the criticisms he sometimes gets laid at him, is that he hasn't actually managed to do that and do what he actually said about rough sleeping. So, well, we'll see, won't we, I suppose, whether he can actually achieve it.
And on that exact point, there is a desire, you get a sense of his desire to project it as a big message on day one, Clive, because this morning, and we should be able to bring you the pictures shortly, Andy Burnham was out and about 6:30 this morning, meeting people who were rough sleeping, serving in a kitchen and emphasising it as a key early promise.
Just to say that it's 1 o'clock and there is no 1 o'clock news as such. We're going to stay with the pictures here and tell you more of the story of this transfer of power with the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, now in number 10. Chris, you were saying that this is something that's close to his heart, clearly. Not as successful up in Manchester as he hoped he would be. But he's also talked about a lot of other things in that brief statement that he gave that are going to cost money. Where's this money going to come from?
Quite, and that's a big early question. Now, he did nod, didn't he, to the fact that later this week, in fact, starting tomorrow, he's going to set out what he describes as a 10-year plan with some more specifics about what he wants to do. And there was a line in there where he said, and how it will be paid for. I think, picking up on the conversation you were just having there with Annabelle, part, I think, of the different style that he's seeking to project as Prime Minister, yes, part of it was addressing us there without a lectern, and so he was ad-libbing. He clearly learned a speech that he was delivering without notes and without an auto-cue. And I think the visit that he has been on this morning, at the crack of dawn this morning, to a homeless shelter and meeting people rough sleeping, as someone who is hours away from being Prime Minister, is also trying to project that sense of someone who wants it to be known from the outset that he's, as he sees it, a grassroots pavement politician who has become Prime Minister, rather than, if you like, the other way round. Just one other thought, Clive. Right now, as we see the melee here of some of the Prime Minister's keenest supporters, many from Greater Manchester, others from beyond. I just see over your shoulder Josh Simons, the former MP for Makerfield, who made this happen by standing aside, creating that vacancy in the Greater Manchester seat that Andy Burnham now represents. Andy Burnham is behind that door. He's just been clapped in by the Cabinet Secretary, the lead civil servant, and lots of other Downing Street civil service staff, and will be taken into a side room, and the gravity of office will descend as he signs those letters of last resort to the commanders of our nuclear submarines and begins the awesome responsibility of being Prime Minister. Yes, he's held high office, executive office in Greater Manchester, cabinet office in previous governments under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, but this is on a level sky high compared with them. And how does he approach that? How does he find it? How does he deal with all of those trade-offs that he'll start confronting right now?
Yeah, Annabelle, going back to his time in Manchester, given the style and change of style that we've talked about, you know, no lectern, a little bit more relaxed, perhaps a better communicator than Sir Keir Starmer, has that been able to override those policy areas where he hasn't been successful in Manchester? For instance, with rough sleeping, has that bought him a little bit more time because at least he's, in a way, telling the public...
Yep, we have got no... Normally, right now, we'd be doing the BBC News at 1 for lunchtime news. That's not happening because we're going to sit here and see. Get plenty of the option.
Did do extremely well.
So Chris,
it was incredible. His
Andy Burnham arrived here
beyond any other
just under 15
politician.
minutes
While
ago with supporters
in the 2019 election were losing their
supporters
seats throughout Greater
and people that
Manchester,
have worked with him
and
for years.
remained very, very
Yeah,
popular.
exactly. Then
So
he was met by that supporters. His mum, his father were down here. His I was 1 month old grandbaby too. And now he's going to number 10 to meet cabinet, meet people and stuff. Him and his partner is going into their brand new home. They're going into number 10 Downing Street, their brand new home, where they're meeting people and stuff there. And it is a moment of political history in the making.
As I mentioned,
I know.
You know, this is the picture of formality.
It is, and it's so odd, and you know, we'll have to get used in the Northwest to calling him Prime Minister, not Andy. And it's things like that because he has very much been hands-on. He's very hands-on with the press. He knows us all by name. He gets certainly across that personality of being everyman. That doesn't mean to say that he's always lovely and fluffy and kind. I've seen him getting quite, as we say in the north, chippy at times, especially with people who came at him about the clean air zone. So, yeah, he's popular, but he has an edge. He certainly has an edge. Well, you have to, don't you?
Chris, I'm interested in this idea of a new politics, the biggest change in British politics for 40 years. I mean, he's talking big here, no question about it. You know, a new political and economic model. What's he driving?
It's a very, very lofty ambition, isn't it? To talk about politics changing to a greater degree than it has for 40 years. Not only the critique that, it's, in his view, there's been this 40 years of neoliberalism, as he puts it, and he means that as a insult. He is talking about the records of previous Labour governments, as well as the records of those you might expect a Labour Prime Minister to criticise, the likes of Margaret Thatcher and John Major. So how does he actually deliver what he sees as a new politics? Well, I think an element of that is the stylistic approach that he will bring, or he hopes to bring to the job. Let's see if that does survive the rigours of an office the like of which he has never previously held. And then as far as an economic model is concerned, again, let's see to what extent can he make sizable and noticeable differences in the matter of maximum a couple of years prior to a general election. That has to happen within 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, Annabelle, he talked about a more collaborative politics as well. Taking politics and the work of this place around the country. Was he collaborative with his opponents and those on the other side of the aisle up in Manchester?
Yes, I would certainly say he did. It certainly gave across that impression. He worked very well with other council leaders, a lot of them in Greater Manchester, of course, are Labour anyway. But say, for instance, if you take Stockport, it was no control for a long time. They had a Liberal Democrat leader, and they worked very closely together. This combined authority did work extremely well with the 10 boroughs of Greater Manchester. Having said that, I mentioned Stockport. Another failure he might say is his housing policy, and having to get all the boroughs of the combined authority to agree to his housing and his building policy, and Stockport didn't. It wouldn't go in with him. So it hasn't always completely worked for him. But yes, he has had quite a good collaborative approach, and I think he's coming back out or what?
For a photo call outside. Number 10 door there.
Yeah, so I think, that's certainly one of his big things, isn't it? And with this Manchesterism, it's having a more collaborative approach to politics, which I think it is fair to say he did do quite well in Greater Manchester.
But Chris, he talks about, sticking to the fiscal rules, following the fiscal rules. He talks about bringing more welfare bill down.
So, Chris Mason is still with me. Andy Burnham has become the UK's 7th Prime Minister in just over a decade, within his first cabinet this afternoon. So, the Prime Minister, new Prime Minister Andy Burnham says, "Political must raise our game and rise to the new challenge." He is speaking in Downing Street for the first time. He said he knows people at home are fed up with politics. "I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough and we need to be better. We will be he pleads. He adds, "Let us make this moment when Britain starts to believe again, the moment we bring back hope. I will bring forward a new plan for a Britain in a 10-year plan." So Chris says, he said in his first speech that he believes that Britain hasn't been good enough. He's going to announce, bring forward a new plan for Britain, a 10-year plan. He's going to announce that later this week. He goes on to say that, "I want to be honest with people." He also told the British people and people that are watching this at home that he knows that people are fed up with politics and bored with it, but he wants to make it better for people in the UK. he was asked about declaring to call general elections. What Andy Burnham said. Andy Burnham, Keegan, he says he does not need to call a general election up entering down the street. He goes on to say that asking by broadcasters whether he will call one. The PM said we in a parliamentary democracy, and as well we see through time if somebody can come in with a major MPs in House of Commons, then they have the legitimacy to lead things forward. He confirmed he will stick to Labour for 2024 general election, manifesting, saying the manifesto, talking about change. I will be bold, I will be true to what the manifesto says, but there are big changes that can immediately come from manifesto. So it seems that Andy Burnham is not going to call for a general election anytime soon, because he has just entered the 10. He's inside the Black Door now, and he's not going to call for a general election anytime soon. At this moment, it doesn't feel like he's not going to announce one yet, and he doesn't feel like now's the right time, because he has just entered the 10, and it's his first day in office with his wife, so he's not going to call for an election anytime soon, but for sound of things.
I will bring forward a new plan for Britain, a 10-year plan, laying out a path from where we are now to where I believe we all want Britain to be, wherever we're coming from, whatever party we support. But I can do something to give people some breathing space now, some help with the cost of living. And I will set out some of those measures starting tomorrow, including how we pay for them. We will help more young people into work by changing the education system and giving them more support, more mental health support. And we will build more council homes. That is the fair and sustainable way to bring the welfare bill down, to meet our fiscal rules and to honour our commitments on defence to our international partners. We will help people to live well, building a more preventative state, investing in people's success rather than paying for failure. And that work starts now. I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country.
Yeah. Andy Burnham there speaking.
Impactful on a wide swathe of the public, it's going to cost billions. Therefore, is that some sort of tax cut? Is that some sort of other cost of living support? If it's going to be paid for, is that some sort of equally controversial tax rise? That's a big decision to do on your first full day as Prime Minister. Whoever is Chancellor, we haven't got a Chancellor yet. When they're walking up there, we might know quite quickly, because they're going to have to get to work and work through the night to make some numbers add up, because that's important. But then I think it's important to note that he said that later this year we will get a 10-year plan for the country and for the economy. And that is where this decentralisation, devolution, spreading power, number 10 North, I think probably infrastructure. I'm intrigued to know, obviously he was a big fan. That was cause of some tension with Downing Street over the Liverpool to Manchester fast train line. But he's also joined forces immediately with the former mayor of the West Midlands, a Conservative former mayor, Andy Street, on essentially rebooting some form of the cancelled HS2 line from Birmingham to Manchester. Jim O'Neill, the former Treasury Minister under a coalition government, well, I think he's quite an interesting figure in that. So you get an idea of sort of long-term plan later this year, some immediate respite for cost of living. Very interested in how that gets paid, and this plan on rough sleeping. But yeah, it's interesting because it's not perhaps typically at the top of the political priorities that the public have expressed, the idea that the country is too centralised on London. But I think it is something. You're from Yorkshire, I'm from Lancashire. It's something that has, so are you, it does have some resonance, I think, with people outside of London. I think the intriguing question is the extent to which Manchester is seen, and his Manchesterism. Some people say that Manchester is a little bit like a mini London. How much does that represent the rest of the country? And indeed, for himself, his Makerfield test versus what goes in the centre of Manchester is quite different from what might go in Makerfield. So these are all intriguing things. We're going to start to get some answers in terms of these trade-offs. Yeah, and it's harder to run a country than it is to run a city.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because going back to the speech, Chris, and the build-up, Manchester this, Manchester that. We were joking about, whether we're all from the north. Us here, I can say this. We were all, some of these people are going to be wearing bucket hats and that kind of thing. Complete nonsense. But there's a point to it, isn't there, that he needed to, some might argue, speak to the people of deprived areas of South Wales, of Cornwall, of the North East. And that was, some might argue, not the kind of speech that might have been said to be inclusive of everyone, perhaps?
Yeah, it's a really tricky balancing act, this, for him, because clearly his authentic heritage, his political bedrock is grounded there in the northwest of England, in those communities between Liverpool and Manchester. What he's attempting to do now, Clive, is a shimmy, a kind of geographical shimmy, to make an argument that says, look, this is not an exclusively northwest of England or north of England phenomenon. It is a gut sense, he believes, of a detachment that plenty of people feel, sometimes psychologically, sometimes geographically, between what goes on in this postcode and the conventions of this postcode, like lecterns, like suits and ties, like middle-aged men, oh dear, I suppose the three of us fall into that bucket, talking a lot about what's going on, that can act as a barrier, visible or otherwise, for people engaging with politics. Now, I noticed actually in that speech, I don't think he referred specifically to number 10 North. Now, granted, he made a big thing of that in that speech he gave a few weeks ago in Manchester. I thought much of the themes of what we heard from him, I was going to say at the lectern, there wasn't a lectern, was there, at the microphone a little while ago, were familiar. We've heard that kind of argument from him and some of the phraseology from him before in recent weeks. Talking about what he's going to say tomorrow, because that's intriguing. What more detail do we get tomorrow? He did, as far as I was touching on, he did explicitly refer to and acknowledge the necessity of spelling out how things can be paid for. By gosh, definitely that, because given that list that we've heard, there's clearly a lot of number crunching to be done in the Treasury next door. Once, as far as I mentioned, there's actually a Chancellor to lead that conversation.
Yeah, we're still waiting for an announcement on that, and indeed all the other top posts in his government. But his point would be, Faisal, that if you spread power more evenly across the country, then you can promote growth. And that's where he's going to get the money from. But that takes time.
Yes. And I think in the interim, so there's different time frames. The sort of transformation he was talking about, if it is to work, it's sort of rebooting Britain alongside a model that may have worked in Germany or in Spain to some description. But the point I was making about Greater Manchester is, across the whole nation, you really do have to say, if you want to reallocate spending, if you want to spend more on infrastructure somewhere else, if you want to cut the income tax, want to stop the freeze on the income tax threshold, effectively cut taxes, you have to explain how that is funded. Either with less spending somewhere else, or with higher taxes, or you might make an argument for higher borrowing, for example, for infrastructure investment. All of that detail is essential now.
But he's going to stay within the fiscal rules.
Yes, and he's not going to. So it is decision time now.
Yeah.
We have heard, if you like, a story, a narrative. And I think one thing that was quite interesting about the fact that he did it without a lectern, which again is just presentational detail, is that if you've heard his speeches over years, if you've looked at what he wrote down in his book that was co-written with Steve Rotheram, it is very familiar. He sort of believes that stuff very, very strongly. I'm not sure any focus group would have told him decentralisation and devolution is the number one issue that's going to excite the nation. But he clearly utterly believes it, and utterly believes that that's the way to A, connect with the public, but B, also offer agency to regions and cities so that they can make the decisions to grow. So that they may choose, like they do in Germany and Spain, if they're smaller cities, to borrow more money because they think that they should have underground metro systems in the third and fourth cities in a way we don't have in the United Kingdom, because everything goes through number 11, everything goes through the Treasury. So he has made that argument for years and years and years, genuinely believes it. That's why he can give a speech like that on some quite nerdy details. It's quite nerdy, like the sort of infrastructure of how decisions are made and which level. But, for example, I do wonder. So one of the arguments I've heard, and this is a real test, and one of the fail points, frankly, of the previous administration of Starmer was that they unbelievably, with a majority of 160 odd, couldn't get their welfare plans through their own parliament, and that is what spooked the markets. I have to say, they're like, well, hang on, what can they get through? So one of the arguments I've heard in the background, and again, tomorrow will be the first test of this, is that he can get things with the credibility with the soft left of the party through the party, and frankly they can't afford to have many rebellions, and he can get things like welfare reform if staged differently. So for example, you go back to Gordon Brown's plans in 2008-9, where you fund up front the jobs creation for young people. He mentioned that mental health support. You offer them mental health support. Does that mean you take them off PIP? Is that the heart? But do you offer the support first? And offer billions of support, get them into jobs. That's the best mental health. Do you offer that then at different levels? Do you offer that to city leaders to do that? That is the sort of plan that was being worked up in the background. That is the sort of thing, I think, is why we'll get the long-term plan in a few months' time and not tomorrow.
Yeah, so there might be an adaptability there of policy in regards some of the left in his party. But is there also a sense that there is potentially an existential threat out there, which is Nigel Farage and reform when it comes to the future of Labour? And that very threat could be what actually ends up keeping some of those backbenchers in line.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's intriguing. The Nigel Farage's influence on what we've seen play out this morning shouldn't be underestimated. He and Reform and their capacity to frighten the living daylights, frankly, out of the Labour Party in the last couple of years is what accelerated Keir Starmer's movement towards the exit, because the Labour Party feared losing to Reform, and there was evidence of that in the elections of just a couple of months ago. Keir Starmer tried to make an argument that he was the best frontman for the Labour Party in taking on Reform, and frankly the Labour Party in the end didn't believe him. Picking up on one of Faisal's points there, what will be fascinating to witness in the opening months of Andy Burnham's premiership is the extent to which he can charm and cajole the parliamentary Labour Party into a place where they are willing to do as he would like, basically. Can he take them with him? I think most would accept he is more deft politically than perhaps Keir Starmer was. And the reason this matters is that if he can, he's got a colossal majority that he can use pretty effectively for a good couple of years before the countdown to the next election begins, if this Parliament runs its full course. As far as Andy Burnham and Nigel Farage are concerned, well, this is going to be one of the split-screen tussles of our time in the next couple of years. Who can triumph between Andy Burnham and Nigel Farage? Of course, there are other players in the mix as well, whether it be Kemi Badenoch or the SNP and Plaid in Scotland and Wales, respectively. But Andy Burnham arrives, and this is perhaps the sort of fortune of a good fortune general, if you like. Andy Burnham arrives at just the point that Nigel Farage is hitting pretty severe turbulence. All of those questions that are swirling about money and transparency and accountability. Of course, that by-election that Nigel Farage has chosen to trigger in Clacton in Essex, the seat that he represented prior to resigning his seat. How does that tussle play out in the next couple of months and next couple of years is going to be central to our politics.
Yeah, I mean, Faisal, he talked about staying within the fiscal rules, a clear signal to the markets that we're not going to do anything silly here. This is not going to be a Liz Truss moment. Yes, I'm making promises on all kinds of things, but it's going to be above board. Don't worry. Does that suggest to you that Shabana Mahmood probably is a shoo-in, bearing in mind that she's from the right of the party more than from the left?
Well, I think the context to this is that 3 months ago, then Mayor Burnham did contemplate some changes to the rules, potentially to account, as they have done in Germany, for defence spending having to go up. He rode back from that pretty quickly during the Makerfield by-election, apparently on the advice, this is not the thing to do. Don't shake things up like that. It has consequences sticking to the rules. It means that whatever the quantum of the giveaway that comes tomorrow morning, we expect, it will have to be balanced with something kind of equally controversial that hasn't fully been prepared. Everything that has been out there, been rumoured, seems to be a net spend item, right? It was significant that he chose to say, well, as you say, he was going to stick to fiscal rules, but also that whatever gets announced tomorrow will be paid for. But on top of that, as I've said, his longer-term plans, extra infrastructure, maybe changing where infrastructure is spent, there was a suggestion that if Ed Miliband goes to the Foreign Office, that might come accompanied with a return to 0.7% of GDP spent on aid. These are significant amounts. We haven't got a fully costed defence settlement, really. I mean, a bit of it was put in there. Some of that defence, just go back to the Defence Investment Plan.
Yeah.
The bit that was accepted was the cuts to infrastructure spending on things like transport and net zero. Well, that is precisely the Burnham agenda, to increase that, and yet he is inheriting trying to find some cuts in that area. So there are very significant trade-offs which we have not heard about. I think in a funny way, coming in here without having had a leadership contest means that he's got a relatively clean slate. But those decisions, those trade-offs, that is what is required. I mean, what's happening now? He's in there getting the hardest of briefings from the cabinet secretary, the most serious of decisions and letters being written on national security. It is a world away from being mayor of a city region. And I think, we should take a step back as well. The idea, it's the first time we've had, I think, in our lifetimes, a regional leader take this journey to there. It's a different supply chain of a leader. But yes, we wait to see how he squares the tough trade-offs that won't change as a result of the change in number 10 and potentially number 11 as well.
Yeah, Chris, we should be getting some indication as to some of the top jobs today.
We should. I'm going to dash in a second to try and find out just some of that information, but we should get within the next couple of hours the key jobs in the cabinet, not least the Chancellor, the Home Secretary and the Foreign Secretary. More cabinet posts to follow throughout the afternoon and into the evening, and then a whole slew of more junior ministers to follow tomorrow. But I'm going to dash, Clive, because hopefully I can find out just the answer to that question.
All right, Chris Mason, political editor, leaving us for a wee while there. You're watching a BBC News special on this transformative day for British politics with the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, now in there, number 10, getting a briefing from the Cabinet Secretary, basically having to write a letter straight away concerning what his view would be if this country came under attack and what would be the movements for our nuclear submarine fleet. And then, of course, he's going to start, we understand, announcing the members of his cabinet who will be taking forward his agenda. He hopes for the next 10 years. He's already suggested that one of his first actions will be to try to institute measures to deal with the rough sleeping problem across the United Kingdom. We know that he's tried to institute certain policies concerning that up in Manchester and has been, to a degree, successful in other areas, not so successful. So the jury is...
I just want to show you a little video clip of the moment where Andy Burnham announced that he would not be doing a general election anytime soon. Oh, I forget that. Let's just go through the key lines of Andy Burnham's first speech as PM. So, Andy Burnham has now entered number 10 as the UK's new Prime Minister. In his first speech to the nation, he gave some timetable details. His first instruction will be to end rough sleeping. Some measures helping to tackle the cost of living, including how we pay for them, will start to be announced tomorrow. A 10-year plan for Britain will be set out later this year. Andy Burnham also gave more sweeping pledges, including in a frank assessment of the country's politics. He said, "We had not been good enough and we need to be better. We will be." His government will take power out of the Whitehall and carry it into every postcode in the land. There was also promise to build a new nation, sense of unity. Other promises include helping young people into work, more mental health support, building more council homes, bringing down the welfare bills. So that's what he said in his first speech as the Prime Minister.
I am acutely conscious that I am the 6th person in the last 10 years to walk up this street, the 7th Prime Minister since 2016, making this a moment for reflection and new resolution. It requires my generation of politicians to raise our game and rise to the new challenge. Britain needs to show the world that we can regain our stability once again. And that is our challenge, to make politics work, to make it work better. I know people at home are fed up with politics. I hear you, and I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough, and we need to be better. We will be. Later this year, I will bring forward a new plan for...
So that was a bit of Andy Burnham's speech that he gave. He is going to set out later this year a 10-year plan for Britain.
Successfully
to President Zelensky
bursting against the limits. So she didn't have the mandate to do what she wanted to do. So quite quickly the markets are asking not just do your numbers add up, but can you pass this through Parliament? And can you pass what you really want to do through Parliament? So I think that is one thing to watch very carefully, which is the extent to which the policies that we know that he wants to pursue, because he has long suggested them, he puts on hold to keep within the 2024 manifesto, or he clearly starts suggesting them. And then there's a question mark about when we get an election. Now, clearly, he's not going to talk about that now, That is what the markets. He said he's going to stick to the rules. He said he's going to make the whatever tax giveaway or whatever cost of living giveaway is going to be paid for tomorrow. We then get this 10-year plan, which, as you say, was meant to promote growth, but you've got to persuade the Office of Budget Responsibility that it's going to promote growth. But then there's a whole lot of other things that he says he wants to do that were not in the 2024 manifesto that raise a question about his strategy.
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot in that speech concerning foreign policy, but one area that certainly Sir Keir Starmer touched on in his goodbye speech, as it were, was Ukraine, and Andy Burnham had his own views on that. Let's hear what he said.
Shama?
I'll be making very clear later today to President Zelensky that there is no change. I will be with him 100%, as Keir Starmer has been, and Keir has done really quite an incredible job in not just backing Ukraine, but being there in a personal way, and I will be absolutely there for him in the same way. I've worked with Ukrainian mayors over the last few years. I've built a network of support for Ukrainian mayors. I take all of that experience into my new role, and President Zelensky will be left in no doubt whatsoever that Britain's support is steadfast, it is resolute, it will be there for him, and I will be there for him personally too.
Andy Burnham speaking before he became Prime Minister. There with me is our international editor, Jeremy Bowen. Interesting that Sir Keir Starmer made a point of talking about
national law. Now, that's something that the Americans have been against. Now, will that alienate Donald Trump? It might do. It might be the makings of a nasty conversation when eventually he goes for his chat with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. And, of course, there will be immediate pressure to spend more money on defence. The US ambassador in London has done a piece in the newspapers today where he's calling for that, spending more money, more rapidly, because that is a way of signalling to the Americans that their hearts and minds are in the right place. However, of course, America's own commitment to the relationship with Britain and with the wider European relationship in general is clearly under Donald Trump, and in some.
If you're retired and exploring equity rooms, here's a few potential do's and don'ts to keep in mind. So many homeowners in the
It's the biggest show of its kind in Europe, and
where explicitly there probably will microphone struggled, set politics, and this upward challenge to make politics. Is a trip to all but the very
But there are some flexibilities you can have on existing developments. We're waiting for a decision on a gas hole, an oil fields called Jackdaw and Rosebank. The mood music we get is that this administration's new administration is keener to get ahead on this, but another paradox and a trade-off to work out exactly where he lands, because he's also said that the net zero agenda, this green industrialisation, is the future of the economy. So the balancing act we're waiting for there. The other issue that is high up on the agenda was, this week we were due to have a summit with the European Union on this post-Brexit reset, with a move back closer to the single market in a couple of areas designed to take away the red tape in food and farm exports. That was done. That was ready to go. Change of Prime Minister, it's been delayed. Now the question is, does Andy Burnham sound quite warm to the idea of picking that deal up and running it? There were some controversies, for example, over students and student fees and how they're paid for. Does he go even further? I mean, just a year ago, he was talking at a Labour Party conference on the fringes about, in his lifetime, we might rejoin the European Union. But now, since he started representing a Leave seat in Makerfield, he sort of shied away and said, well, that's not really for now. to go to the interesting question, and although it may not be the most sort of pertinent question in Westminster right now, on his left flank with those Green supporters that Labour had been losing votes to, that is an issue that he'll want to shore up potentially. We don't know. There will be a summit he'll have to attend, and the trade-offs will be owned by the new Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, one wonders who the first foreign leader will be to give him that phone call, which is the usual thing when a new Prime Minister takes over.
There's a good detail there, which is there is now two people around the G7 table who are supporters of Everton Football Club. Because Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, is also a supporter. So that is a moment of history for the Toffees, that they'll have two people around the G7.
There's another thing that needs to be said about top tables. There is one top table that Britain is still very much has an automatic seat on, which is the Security Council of the UN, and probably more with that. In general, the UK has been more absent than present in a lot of international deliberations since the Brexit referendum 10 years ago, because we have been so introspective, and I think that is one thing that has changed.
Yeah, all right, Jeremy, international editor Jeremy Bowen there. Let's hear a little bit more of what Andy Burnham was saying here in number 10, outside number 10, about 40 minutes ago.
I will bring forward a new plan for Britain, a 10-year plan, laying out a path from where we are now to where...
Yeah.
In your speech as you accepted the Labour leadership, that you want to deliver the biggest change in our politics in 40 years. It sounds like a massive ambition, for which you do need a mandate beyond the 25,000 people who voted for you in the Makerfield by-election. When are you going to call a general election?
Well, we're in a parliamentary democracy, and as we've seen through time, if somebody can command the majority of the MPs in the House of Commons, obviously they then have the legitimacy to lead things forward. And I will lead forward consistent with the manifesto, which also talked about change. And I now want to work on the platform that Keir Starmer has left to deliver that change, a massive change in our politics. That's what number 10 North is about, taking the power out of Westminster and Whitehall into every postcode in the land, and from there building a new economy. And that's what I will talk about today, putting the basics under stronger public control to make them affordable to people again, reindustrialising Britain, using public procurement to back British industry. These are big changes. They are the biggest changes in 40 years. We've had 40 years of trickle-down economics, which hasn't trickled down very much at all to many parts of Britain. You go up and down the country, you can see high streets in decline, communities that never recovered from the deindustrialisation of the 1980s, and this is what I'm about changing.
To be better was one of his words about his generation of politicians. In a way, it's happened very fast, but also, let's remember, he first ran to be
the quickest way from a billion points of data to a point of view. SAS Via.
You can hear the helicopters overhead, I'm sure. You can hear the applause, and that applause is about to get...
It was described to...
She was going to say...
He's hit in the 1980s.
With a back.
Thank you.
Here, the helicopters.
Changes.
The day that Andy Burnham takes over as Prime Minister.
Good morning.
Yeah. Thank God. I'm just going to take you back to Andy Burnham's first speech as a brand new Labour leader and brand new Prime Minister of the UK.
I have just come from Buckingham Palace, where I have accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government. In doing so, I am acutely conscious that I am the 6th person in the last 10 years to walk up this street, the 7th Prime Minister since 2016, making this a moment for reflection and new resolution. It requires my generation of politicians to raise our game and rise to the new challenge. Britain needs to show the world that we can regain our stability once again. And that is our challenge, to make politics work, to make it work better. I know people at home are fed up with politics. I hear you, and I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough, and we need to be better. We will be. We will make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain, bringing forward the biggest changes in the last 40 years. A new political model